Hello and welcome to this fourth tutorial video on how to make a button jointed memory bear. In this video we're going to be stuffing and button jointing the head. These are 3 centimeter buttons and they're a nice size for this bear. I'm also using stranded cotton. It doesn't need to be bright yellow, but I think it'll make it easier for me to show you exactly what I'm doing with this. But the first thing we need to do before any of that is we need to stuff the bear's head. I'm using a really nice quality polyfiber. You can use K-Park or natural cotton filling. First of all, I need to turn the head right side out and push right down to the end of the nose. Make sure that's come through all the way. Although if you stuff the head of the bear properly, it's going to push out all of those little bits at the end of the nose. And then through the opening in the bottom here. And small quantities of polyfiber. We don't want it bunched up, we don't want lumps of polyfiber, but in little sections so that we can be sure we aren't leaving any gaps, and paying particular attention to the muzzle area because that needs to be well stuffed. And it's easy to, if you put a big lump of polyfiber in, it's quite easy to leave almost like an air bubble in behind where you haven't pushed the polyfiber through. I am going to speed up the stuffing process here because it's really not very interesting to watch, and the most important thing you need to remember is keep checking that you haven't left any air bubbles or any gaps. So as you can see, I'm just little bits at a time and keep checking around to make sure you haven't left any spaces, and keep making sure you're getting it in the muzzle there. Give it a good push into the muzzle area. It really is amazing to realise that on most of these projects, our ragdolls or our bears, a huge quantity of the stuffing for projects will go into the head. By far and away, the most heavily packed part of a bear or a doll will be in the head, and that's because of the shaping. We're going to be pulling in using glass eyes, we're going to be pulling in with a nose thread, and we don't want any of that to crumple or squash and pull the head out of shape. So the last few bits of polyfiber are going in now. We want to make sure that our bear has a nice rounded head shape, and I can see there's a little gap on this side that needs just a little bit more stuffing to go in there. And I think that will round his cheeks out nicely. There we go. You can use a wooden spoon handle or a special stuffing tool, but actually on a bear this size your hands are fine. Make sure his nose is nicely stuffed, and I think that's good. I've got 4 lengths of 30 centimeter long stranded cotton, and I'm not going to use those 2. I'm just going to use 2 at the moment to show you how to do this. I'm going to thread them onto a needle with a fat eye like a darning needle and pass those into my button with the flat edge against the base of my bear's head, so pointing outwards. So cotton in there and down through there. Now if you want to make it extra secure, use those other 2 strands as well and pass them all 4 through, but these 2 will do for now. It'll be less messy for you to see what's happening as well. And then I'm going to sew all around the head opening here with running stitch. And again, I'm using a contrasting thread. This is just an extra strong thread, and I've doubled it up on a needle with a knot at the end, and I'm just going to do running stitch all the way around. I'm giving myself quite a nice wide seam allowance because there's going to be quite a lot of pressure pulling against the edge of the fabric here. And this, although it's a lovely quality cotton, it's not the tightest weave in the world, and I haven't lined it with interfacing. I will do a tutorial video on interfacing your fabric so that no matter how flimsy or loose woven they are, you can strengthen them. But for now I think this will be fine. Just give it a slightly wider seam allowance. and I'm going to go all the way around the outside, little running stitches. Under the chin, and all the way around to the back. There is a tutorial for running stitch if you need it, which I can link to this. There we go, all the way around, and finish off back at our starting thread. There we go. And that's going to be cut off at the needle there, so it just gives me the ends, and I'm going to pull that tight. Now I could really do with an extra pair of hands here, but I don't have anybody else about at the moment, so I'm just going to do it myself and place the button with the threads pointing out into the head. Now this is going to want to pop out and slip about, so you're going to have to be a little bit dexterous and pull that drawstring effect back in. Oh, there you go, it's popped out. Push it in, pull that in. As soon as you start to draw it right around, it'll hold it in place. And I am actually going to take it off camera while I grip it and knot it until we get this. Our threads hanging out at the top, and these extra strong ones, which I can now, that I've knotted securely, I can pass them back into the doll needle and lose them inside of the head. This is a technique we use very often on doll making and bear making, where you pass the unwanted threads, loose ends, back in at the knot, pull them out at the opposite side, and then pulling them tight. And again, an extra pair of hands here would be handy, and pull it a little bit tight and cut it as close as you can to the fabric without catching the fabric, and the ends will pop back inside. Do the same with the other two bits of extra strong. Back in at the knot, across to the other side of the head, and then just pull it tight and snip it off close to the fabric. And when you loose, I just pull that a bit tighter. When you loose, those ends disappear back inside. So here are the threads hanging from our button. This is an additional little tip that I haven't included in the instructions, and this is for those occasions where after you've cut out your bear and you've sewn it all together, you look at somewhere like the neck joint where you can see real pressure being put on it, and you think, do you know what, I want a little bit of reassurance that's not going to come apart, and I'm just sewing across backwards and forwards around the neck just to secure it. What this does is it spreads out the pressure. The threads that you're taking backwards and forwards across here are taking some of the pressure away from the fabric. Now I've caught the threads from the button there underneath, and I want to make sure they hang directly down. I don't want them pushed over to one side, otherwise my bear's going to have a permanent tilt on his head, and although I like the idea of him being able to kind of cock his head backwards and forwards, I don't want the threads being trapped one side or the other. So make sure they stay in the middle as you go backwards and forwards with little stitches all the way around, and then just knot it off when you're done. In our next video, we'll give our bear a face. That concludes our tutorial video. I hope it's been helpful. If it has, please subscribe to the channel, give us some feedback and a like. There are more videos coming soon.